The great Mr. Joe Chambers.
Now, the thing before I go on with that, there's a gap between Elvin Jones and Tony Williams. See, there's a gap between Elvin Jones and Tony Williams. And that gap.
Yeah. Like I chronicled the evolution of the modern drums. You got Big Sid, Joe Jones, Big Sid Catlett, Art Blakey, Max Roach, Roy Haynes, Philly Joe Jones, Elvin Jones, and there's a gap between Elvin Jones and Tony Williams. And that gap, I'm not gonna say me. Somebody told me, the gap, that's you're the gap. The gap is, you might not know, you heard Pete LaRocca?
Yeah, the doctor.
Pete LaRocca. That's the gap. And Pete LaRocca, who's passed, but the name was Pete Sims. And he was an African American, but he played timbales in Latin bands. He was a Latin player. That's why he changed his name to LaRocca. He had incorporated all of the Latin rhythms with jazz playing. And then you're talking about a rare breed of percussionists. And he was the one. Max Roach was with Bird. And Dizzy Gillespie was the first from the jazz side to blend in the Caribbean rhythms with Chano Pozo. He was the first on the jazz side to blend in jazz and Afro-Cuban music. Mario Bowser was the first on the Latin side to blend in that. And so, yeah, Chano Pozo, with the Chano Pozo coming in with Dizzy Gillespie, incorporating those rhythms. What happened in the 40s, in the bebop era, rhythmically, drummers freed themselves. They freed themselves, and telling them they freed everybody else. They freed the bass players, the piano players, everything. Yeah, Max Roach was, I'm still trying to be like Max Roach. Max Roach, he started this group that we're gonna do. But Max Roach was always, to me, he was extremely versatile. He was always doing stuff. He did stuff with choirs, symphony orchestras, string quartets, theater. He was like that. I like that, like what I'm saying, and I looked at that as a model. I said, man, this is dude, and he wrote music. See, the key points to understanding and the development of jazz, and jazz developed without they were not able to call the Orishas, like the Wawakos and Rumbas, but they created this. This is a creation from North America. And developed out of that. So, to move on with the development of jazz, and jazz rhythmically, etc. Jazz rhythmically, they broke what I call the revolution of breaking out was in the 40s, in what they call the bebop era, primary to right after the so-called swing era. The drums like Max Roach, was really Kenny Clark, Big Sid Catlett, then Max Roach. The drum line in that era is this. The drum development goes from Joe Jones to Big Sid Catlett, Kenny Clark, Max Roach, Art Blakey. Art Blakey and Max Roach developed simultaneously. They were simultaneously developing the modern style. The modern style, which I'll play a little bit, came out of these people.
The main thrust was placed here on this ride. Bass drum is free. Left hand is free.
More.
I'll be in shape. I'll be in shape a little bit. But there's a main drummers, I named the drummers. Now there's a drummer who plays true cross rhythms, and that's Elvin Jones. Elvin Jones brought the djembe feel to jazz drums.
African drums. Africans have drums in the family. They have many types of drums, djembes, and certain drum from Senegal. Then you have a drum from a djembe from Ghana. And Congo is different. They're all different, you know. So the Congo drum was created in Cuba. The Cuba we know. They invented the Congo drum and placed it in their ensembles. So that was something I learned. So then we had all of these specialists. We had two specialists in Afro-Cuban music in the group at the same time with Steve Barrios and Ray Mantilla. And Ray Mantilla's gone, so we had Sanabria. Sanabria was also a specialist in Afro-Cuban rhythms, Afro-Cuban music. And he plays the drums, the jazz drum sets. That's very important there. And that's why we had to get a replacement for Steve. Steve was one of the only one. Steve was an authentic jazz drummer. And he was an authentic Afro-Cuban specialist. A very important person.
So Joe, when you talk about M-Boom, talk a little bit about this past October in
DC.
In Washington D.C. at the sold out Kennedy Center, and how Bobby Sanabria replaced Steve,
Right.
And talk a little bit about that performance. I thought that was very important.
I made a connection in DC with connected me up, and Jason Moran knew of me, and he said, yeah, that's nice. That sounds interesting, because I did a show in 2000. 18 with M-Boom and strings. A string group called the DC Queens, a string quartet associated down there. We did the show, we did the Congressional Black Caucus annual, they have an annual jazz concert by way of Conyers, you know, John Conyers, of course they got him out, but John Conyers is a jazz aficionado.
Oh, absolutely.
And he hooked us up, the Boom, with the String Queens of DC, and we did that performance at their annual party. Okay, and that was very interesting. I originally had the idea of doing Boom with the strings. I still do. I still want to do something with them. But Moran said, "Yeah, that sounds interesting. Get it together." So I first wanted to do the strings, but then I said, "No, this is going to be a big place. Kennedy's a powerful place. I'm going to have some horns, an orchestra." So I got a DC-based orchestra and Boom together for the show we did in October. And I knew the orchestra, I knew musicians in DC anyway, and I knew the dude who had an orchestra. He had a house band like in the caverns, the Bohemian Caverns at that time. So we did that, we got that, rehearsed it. Took a while to get it together because I had to run back and forth to DC, you know, and rehearse them cats.
And most interesting, you wrote all the charts.
Oh, for sure. Always did.
Say that again.
I always, and still am, trying to be like Max Roach. But I wanted to sound like Philly and Elvin. But I was trying to be like Max. Max is over all of them because he showed me how to, you know, he's doing what I was doing. He did stuff with the orchestra, with choirs, with, you know, theater companies. He was broad, you know. He started the Boom. He started, you know, Max. He was always out. He was always ahead. So the range is extremely vast range of sound possibilities. That's why I say it is the most broadest range of timbre sounds than any. So we all had to learn percussion. Now we were drummers, you know, we were playing the drum, I was playing the drum set. Of course I played a little piano, and I played piano way back when I was very young. So for that fact, it was kind of, I say this, and vibraphone specialists don't like for me to say this, playing this instrument was not that hard for me because I already knew the keyboard, the piano, and this is set up just like a piano. So it was just a matter of getting the sticking. I already knew the chords and the structure. So we got together and we rehearsed every Saturday at Warren Smith's place. And he had the whole array of percussion I mentioned. So in fact, we had to learn, we were like going to school, we had to learn how to play the timpanis properly. we had to learn how to play these instruments properly. And of course, you got all of those little small things and that you see people. I have a few myself. I'll show
Yeah. Explain those instruments.
you. Well, they're called idiophonic. Cowbells, triangles, triangular, and all sorts of there's thousands of these things. This is all a part of the percussion family, and they are called, academic term is idiophones. Idiophonic because they're self-producing. They contain the sound within themselves. So the fact of the matter is, you have to play a triangle. You have to learn how to hit a triangle. Tempo slow. 1, 2, 3. Take it from the G minor again. Sure. That because of one correction. That, the chords over there is A to D. It's quick A to D, right? Yeah.
So now we're in North Carolina.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, and it's 2020 in June, and you're doing a recording day for Blue Note Records.
That's right.
And
Universal, it's really universal.
Well, Universal,
Yeah.
Blue Note. I like to mention Blue Note because you've had a long association.
For sure.
With Blue Note Records, and and for me, this is a pretty historic session, based on the fact that you've been featured probably on hundreds of Blue Note recordings.
That's right. That's right. You know, it's I got a little story, interesting story. When I first moved to New York, '63, well, I had met Eric Dolphy, the late Eric Dolphy, and in D.C. when he came through to D.C. And so Eric, I was down there in D.C. living, studying, and playing at the cabin. So Eric came through, so I wrote a tune that was like a class for a class. I was studying, it was a class piece. It was called Mirrors, to display mirror writing. He said, yeah, I like this, boom, boom, boom. So when I got to New York, he had a record date. He assembled a record date. Well, he was with Blue Note, as a matter of fact, called Out to Lunch. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yes, I'm very familiar with Out to Lunch.
I wasn't even on the date. It was Tony Williams, Richard Davis, Bobby Hudson, Freddie Hubbard, and Eric. But he told me to come to the rehearsal. He said, come to the rehearsal, bring music. And I brought music. I brought this. And I didn't know what he was doing was setting me up. He was setting me up with Blue Note. And I remember when I brought the music, to me it wasn't no big deal. You know, I'd been writing it. I just brought the tune. And Tony Williams was in awe. He was really, he was in awe. I tell you, it was like, because see, there was no drummers writing music and bringing music around, not except Max Roach.
Yeah.
So that was the intro to Blue Note. And Blue Note, of course, we got with Freddie. Freddie got a band. That was my first recording. Then I just started getting the calls and calls and calls, you know, to do these dates. So,
name some of the musicians, some of the dates.
Man, it was Freddie, Hubbard, McCoy Tyner, Joe Henderson. Did a bunch of stuff with Joe Henderson, Kenny Durham. I said Bobby Hutchinson, Joe Henderson, McCoy Tyner, Sam Rivers, Andrew Hill. Did about a bunch of albums with Bobby Hutchinson, maybe 10 or 12. So I was in, you know, I was in there.
Yeah. So how important is this current project with Blue Note Records? How does that fit in with the your historic legacy with Blue Notes? How does this particular recording fit in?
You know, I sent you something, email. It was an interview.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
It was about Blue Note.
Yes.
You remember that?
I sure do.
That was it was a couple years ago. So they did that article. You know, here's the link to Blue Note. You know, boom, boom, boom. So I think that's what kicked it off. And then Don was, of course, he knew. Matter of fact, he set up the interview, so he knew me. So I'm like a continuation of, to make a long story short, a continuation of it. Of course, those days, the old Blue Note is gone. This the new Blue Note. It's a whole different scene.
So what is this gonna sound like?
Well, That's from a piece called Echo.
And that's one of the pieces that's going to be part of the project.
That's right.
So we're really gonna look forward to that, Joe.
All right.
And thank you so very much for your time, man. I really appreciate the 3 days that I got a chance to spend with you. It was very educational. It was very funny. It was intense.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly gratifying, man. I appreciate it so very much.
Man, I appreciate it too. Okay.